Recently, and probably unsurprisingly, I upset some people on Twitter talking about Rogue. So I wanted to take the chance to talk a little bit about the hype that Rogue has coming into Season 3 of Apex. Some of the kind of expectations we have for them, and maybe some of the reasons that I think people are giving them undue credit when I think there are better reasons you could provide as to why Rogue is going to very likely do well in Season 3 of Apex. So to start this all off, Harsha had a tweet kind of late last night, and he just said, context heading into Korea, Rogue has not lost a set since December, whatever it was, 16th of 2017. Basically, they haven't lost a single series since IEM Gyeonggi in December of last year. And which I just replied, Rogue hasn't played an elite team since then, and yet they still have this much hype around them. And some people kind of took that to mean that I meant Rogue was completely undeserving of hype. So, first of all, what I meant was Rogue, quite literally, hasn't played, this elite level talent since December, when they played LW Red at the time. But they still have so much hype around them, so I think it's important for us to understand why they still have so much hype. So, but going into the statement that upset people a little bit, when we're defining elite teams, elite is always going to be subjective to the person, but the way that I define elite is an elite team, or elite teams, are kind of in a class of their own. They are a subsection of, the best teams of the world that are just a step above. Oftentimes, this means that the elite teams are the only ones who can take series off each other, because, the teams below, just, there's something missing there. So, sometimes this means you can have, maybe just 2 elite teams. Maybe you have, 8 elite teams in a super competitive world. Right now, I would say in Overwatch we have probably 3 elite teams, and it'd probably be Lunatic High, Runaway, and LW Blue would probably be the 3 for me that I see as the elite. Rogue and Meta Athena are the other 2 that are definitely kind of challenging it. Less so Meta Athena with kind of some weird fluctuations recently. But as of now, I don't believe that we can say Rogue is an elite team because they haven't proven it with their recent results. So I had people telling me on Twitter, for whatever reason, that Rogue winning in the APAC Premier is somehow relevant to their current roster state. And I want to take a second to, I think when you replace a full third of your roster, 2 players for an Overwatch team, of course, you can't call that the same team. So I don't like using the APAC results. I don't like using, going back to like Gamescom, even like Season 1 of Apex for Rogue. I just don't like using those results to judge this current roster because it is such a different team. As well as you lost some, very good players in Tavik, who's probably the best player in the world. You lost Reinforce, who is somebody that I think is such a good person to have on your team because of the mind he has. So if we look at this iteration of Rogue's results, we have pretty much IEM where they lost, which we can give that to them because they had formed this roster like a week before or something crazy like that. And then after that, basically all we have, or not basically, all we have is these online cups. And they have won every single series since December. And that is very impressive. I don't know how many series it is actually off the top of my head, but they've won, according to Liquipedia, it is 3 Alienware Monthlies since then. They won the Pit Championship, obviously, and then the Overwatch Rumble just this past weekend. And having all these, first place finishes where they were they dropped a couple maps here and there, but they dropped absolutely no series. It looks impressive on paper, right? And I think it deservingly, we should recognize these results. But we also need to hold these results in context. So, of course, one of the biggest contexts, or not the biggest, but one of the most important pieces of context to keep in mind here is who they were playing against. And you look at who they're playing against, and who's the best team they played in this time? Like Selfless, maybe? Or Immortals? Basically, my point is that these teams are kind of middle of the pack for Western teams, right? There are a lot of European teams right now that I would hold are better than pretty much every North American team, and Rogue in my head is a European team, and they kind of fit into that. So I don't see, Selfless Immortals and stuff competing with these European teams, and then I especially don't see the field that Rogue is playing against, competing with who Rogue is going to have to play, even just in the group stage of Apex. This season they're going to have to play Lunatic High, Kongtu Panthera, and the third team in that group doesn't matter because they're going to get their shit kicked in by everybody. Whoever it is. I actually can't remember. But basically, if you want to say, okay, guys, Rogue went on this 4-month win streak, right, which is impressive, and because of this 4-month win streak, Rogue is now going to, do very well in Apex. That doesn't sit well with me for a lot of reasons. Again, the caliber of teams they've been playing against does not stack up. Selfless, Immortals, whoever you want to pick in North America does not match up to Lunatic High. And likely doesn't match up to Kongtu Panthera. We don't know much about their current roster, but I would wager that Kongtu Panthera is still going to be okay. They still have a very strong core to that roster that they're bringing in new players around. And then moving past group stages, if they want to, make it out of the GSL-style quarterfinals, again, look at the groups that they could potentially be in. I think a very likely scenario is that Rogue gets second seed in their group. Lunatic High goes out first, then it's Rogue, Panthera. I think Rogue will be Panthera. And of course, what that means is that as a second seed, they could get picked by a team like LW Blue. Who knows? So there's a world that we live in where we could have a quarterfinal group that's like Lunatic High, LW Blue, Rogue. That is a fucking insane group when you think about it. Seriously, that's probably 3 of the top 5 teams in the world. Maybe not. Maybe Rogue might not be top 5, but that's 3 of the best teams in the world right now. That's an insane group. And if you want to say that, okay, again, we'll use these 4 months of Rogue's dominance in North America in online cups against teams as evidence somehow that Rogue is going to do well against the likes of LW Blue, Lunatic High, whoever they have to play against in Korea, doesn't sit well with me. That just doesn't make sense. And it's unfortunate because there are arguments for Rogue to do very well in Apex. There are. But when people just go around so blindly citing their current win rates and stuff, it seems so just lazy. And for example, I think probably the best argument that anybody can give me right now as to why Rogue is going to do very well in Apex is that they have their own style figured out pretty well. Of course they didn't invent it, but they certainly popularized it. This kind of crazy aggressive dive, like Winston, Genji, Tracer, Soldier sitting in the back, just like firing in, and they switch up the supports, but they generally have a Zenyatta, and then either like an Ana or Lucio, and the supports kind of switch up stuff. Excuse me. And they're very clearly dedicated to that style. They've been playing that style basically nonstop for 4 months. I think, if I remember right, they've picked Reinhardt like 3 times, maybe, over the course of this whole 4 months, and they've been playing quite a lot. So they figured out their one style, and I think it's always a really powerful thing when a team has figured out their style and just sticks to it. And they kind of, if they have to, they brute force it in certain situations just because it works for them the best. I think, for example, that's how Envious could also do the best going into Season 3 of Apex. So, and the counter argument, of course, is that, well, maybe Rogue can only play that style, and maybe they will suffer. But I think that style fits for Rogue so well, especially in the current meta. So, I think it fits well for Rogue in general, because Nox is a very good Winston player, and Soon is also a very good Tracer player. But the other thing is, those two haven't really shown that they can play much else. Nico has shown that he can play D.Va recently, which is, I think, good for the roster. AKM, we know from his history, can play things besides Soldier. Soldier fits very well into the comp, so why not? And Unko is, like, a nutty support player. He's probably the best Western support player. I'd have to think more on that, but he's definitely up there. And this style is maybe a little bit restricted in my head by Nox and Soon, because Nox, it seems like, can really only play Winston at that level, and Soon, it seems like, can really only play Tracer at that level. But kind of the world that we live in from the patches right now, that style's fine. And what I mean by this is the recent D.Va change, where Defense Matrix now no longer has the minimum distance required to absorb a projectile. I worded that poorly. So defense matrix. So projectiles coming into defense matrix, there's no more minimum distance they have to travel. They can be absorbed instantly. So what this did was previously Zarya players could just throw the Graviton Surge at their feet, and D.Va could not absorb it. So you could always get a Graviton Surge off if you just like ran into the enemy team and threw it at your feet. So this gave us the meta in like the group stages of Season 2 of Apex, where Zarya players were getting nano boosted like left and right. Obviously, Hoon was very famous for it, but even on teams like Luna Takai, Zunbo was getting tons of nano boosts, and you're taking away from like, who are you? Who is this Genji who proved that if you gave him the resources, it could destroy people? So D.Va now can always absorb Defense Matrix if she's paying attention to the Zarya, of course. So what this meant that we see Zarya has phased way out of the meta, and D.Va has come back really strong. And this is actually a huge boon for Tracer players, and especially if you're a Rogue, when you have Soon, this is really good for Soon. And the reason why is because Zarya kind of lets your team have more leeway, almost, with mispositions. And what I mean by this is, Zarya doesn't have to be standing next to the target that she saves with her shield. She can be actually quite a distance away, right? So if you have, maybe a support player, in the backline, right, who gets dove by whatever, you throw a Winston and a Genji at the, the Ana player. The Zarya can be on the front lines dealing with the enemy team, turn around, shield that Ana, and then keep doing stuff. And that Ana, in theory, doesn't get blown up as quickly. D.Va, on the other hand, which has basically replaced Zarya for many teams, has to be standing next to that target, or at least very close to that target, to kind of keep them surrounded by the defense matrix. So what this means for a player like Soon is that Soon doesn't have to worry about Zarya shield timings anymore. He basically just needs to go where D.Va is not. So if D.Va is, on, whatever, if you're on some theoretical, empty plane, right, and D.Va's over in one side protecting these teammates, Soon just goes over here and dumps a pulse bomb on the exposed player, and they just die. And previously, when there's a Zarya, that player could say, hey, I need a shield, oh my god, I'm gonna die. The Zarya can turn, target them, block that pulse bomb. That player maybe still dies to Soon, but at least, survives the initial attack. So now, we get this world where, not only Soon, but just Tracer players in general, are getting to kind of run amok. And when you do have a team like Rogue, who is so focused around, Nox going in and, zoning all these players and stuff, and then allowing players like Soon, Nico, and AKM to kind of follow up and throw in damage afterwards, this style works so well in the current meta. Rogue's looks good, and my point being is, I think if you were to tell me this argument, this is a much more complete reason why Rogue is going to do well in Apex. And for me, this is why I have high expectations for Rogue. I don't subscribe much to the idea that the 4-month win streak Rogue has online, which people can make arguments that there are no lands, what is Rogue supposed to do? True, that's perfectly valid point, but it doesn't change the fact that the matches they have played are online, and online inherently carries less weight because it's less pressure, the stakes are pretty much always lower, especially in these situations. You can't tell me a fucking monthly melee means as much to Rogue as Apex does. That's just bullshit. So they're not going to be trying as hard, in the Overwatch Rumble where Rogue played Envious in the grand finals, after map 1 where Rogue destroyed Envious, or no, after their attack phase on Gibraltar, where Rogue destroyed Envious, Taimu was in the chat I have 150 ping, and I'm assuming other players of Envious did as well. And that's just insane. You can't compete in environments like that. So online results just don't mean as much as LAN. And they don't have LAN results. So I have to take their results and knock them down a peg, because they've been online. Second, we have to knock them down because of who they've been playing against. Just the competition doesn't stack up. So using those as reasons to say that Rogue is not only maybe, some people are claiming that Rogue is an elite team in the world. That is false to me. But using that to say, oh, Rogue will do well because they've done so well in North America is just completely false. If you give answers like what I've done, where I try and construct an argument why Rogue's certain style works and why it fits into the meta very well, and, kind of a more concrete answer, then I buy it. I completely agree that Rogue is going to do very well in Apex. I have an article coming out tomorrow. I'm saying it now. You guys can see it. Rogue will very incredibly likely get out of groups because Panthera apparently isn't doing very well, so they're going to get out of groups. If they can survive quarters, that's a whole other question. But Rogue is going to do well in Apex, guys. They're going to win series, they're going to take, very impressive games off of Korean teams, and they have a shot at proving that they're an elite team. But currently, I don't see a basis for us to say that they are an elite team in the world.